At this time, I'll call to order the City of Joliet Pre-Council meeting for June 4th, 2018. The Honorable Robert Odekirk, Mayor, presiding. Mayor.
We'll begin with roll call. Mayor Odekirk.
Here.
Councilman Dickinson.
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin.
I'm here.
Councilman Girl.
Here.
Councilman Hug.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Mudrin.
Here.
Councilwoman Quillman.
Here.
Councilman Turk.
Here.
First on the agenda this evening is a presentation, Future Development Options for the Riverwalk Apartment Complex by Holston Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, Mayor Odekirk and council members. We appreciate the opportunity to come back. As you recall, we met with you all May 10th and 11th to elicit feedback on several scenarios that we had at the time. We took your feedback very seriously and have now come up with 5 new scenarios, and Andrea Keeney with me is going to take you through the PowerPoint slide.
Hi, Mayor and council members. Nice to see you all again. I believe all of you have a PowerPoint presentation in front of you, and I will walk you through this. As Peter mentioned at our meeting about 2 weeks ago, we received feedback from you all, and so after that meeting, we put together 5 new scenarios. Some of these scenarios you've seen before, but there are some modifications, and then there are some new scenarios as well. So we will skip to, here we go, the first slide. You all are familiar with this. This is an existing site plan that's there currently with 356 units, 7 buildings, and a community center as well. And this is more just for reference. The first scenario we're presenting is 319 units. So essentially what we're doing here is removing buildings F and G. When we did the walkthrough, I think everyone thought those buildings are in pretty bad condition and should come down. So as part of this, we'll be retaining all the remaining buildings, demolishing F and G, and then that leaves us with 319 units. Those 319 units would continue to be operated as 100% project-based voucher units. We'd be removing 37 of the existing units or 2 buildings, and then demolition of about $275,000 would be paid for by operations. As you all know, there's a combination of studios, 1s, 2s, and 3-bedroom units. The city purchase price of about $11.4 million, if we switch to the next slide, shows that it has the ability to be paid back in 17 years. So it's about $716,000 from cash flow annually, operating it as is with the 319 units, which takes us to the year 2034 when it's paid back, which is 17 years. The next scenario is the same pretty much layout. It's the existing 319 units, again, demolishing F and G. The difference in this scenario is that we're adding back legal fees. So we've been told that the city had an estimated legal expense of about $10 million from the condemnation proceedings. So a total kind of purchase price / legal fees of about $21.5 million. So if we're to operate the building the buildings as is, we'd be able to pay that amount back in 30 years. I think a lot of you had questions about the current condition of these buildings, in addition to buildings F and G. So we have a replacement reserve with HUD right now. It's about, I believe, $2.5 to $2.8 million. We could potentially tap into that money to do the capital repairs that are needed. As I think we mentioned to all of you at our individual meetings, we are in the process right now of putting together a list of capital repairs. Those capital repairs, kind of a summary of all of those amounts, will be provided to you all by the 15th of this month. So those are going to be the big ticket items that need to be addressed now. The capital, or the replacement reserve, also is funded monthly or annually through operations. So once we take some of that money to do the capital repairs, over time, money will be going into building up that reserve as well. So flipping to the next page here, I think I mentioned this payback is in 30 years. So it's the 21.47 million, again, including legal fees. So operating this as is for 30 years. The next page, scenario 3, shows 177 units. So this scenario, we have demolished 4 of the buildings. So we're retaining 3 of the 7 residential buildings. In addition, we would be retaining the community center, which is labeled as E on this. So 177 units would be operated with the current unit configurations. We would do a mod rehab on all of these buildings. So the estimated cost of construction for that is about $75 a square foot. The remaining, all of the units, 177 units, would continue to be operated with 100% as 100% project-based voucher units. The unit configurations will not change in the buildings that are retained. So it will still be studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And the city purchase price will be paid through the operations and capital budget. And that's estimated to be paid back by 2024. Now, 2024 is assuming that we're able to get financing from IDA to do this project, first off in 2021 and second in 2024. So we believe that there is about a 3-year time frame that it takes to get in their pipeline, kind of get the approval to move forward with the project. So if you, page 11 shows the first sub-phase of development. So the first sub-phase, we would anticipate doing building C and D, which is the one that's on the southern end of the site, and then also the one that's on Broadway, kind of a standalone building. And so that total development cost, doing a mod rehab for that, is about $20 million. There's a financing gap that we're showing here of about $400,000. Now there's ways to fill that gap. We could look potentially to the city to include CDBG funds. We have not included this on any of the scenarios, but I do know that there's an allocation that the city receives each year. I mean, I think $400,000 is something that we could figure out how to fill. That's the first subphase of development. The second subphase, which is on page 12, shows 71 units. This would be solely doing building A, and there's a gap here of about 2.4 million. So a combined gap on these 2 subphases, while they'll be done separately, we're kind of looking at them as one overall project at the bottom of the spreadsheet. $34.8 million for redevelopment of a scenario of this sort, and then a funding gap of 2.7 million. So the other ways to fill that gap, we have home funds included in here on both subphase of about $1.5 million. And speaking with IDA, the Illinois Housing Development Authority, last week, they thought that that would be a conservative amount to include in our budget. We could potentially go up to $2 million on both subphases. So that would be another $1 million that we would have that would reduce this 2.7. The other, again, as we mentioned before, are CDBG funds from the city if they would want to allocate a portion of their annual amount that they receive, and or looking at reducing the amount of the acquisition payback. The next scenario 4, it is going to be difficult to finance, but it was asked by some of you. I think there was some concern about the existing unit configurations at the buildings. And so what we did on this scenario is we looked at retaining the buildings, but basically doing a gut rehab as opposed to a mod rehab. This would be about $200 a square foot for construction costs, but it would change the unit configuration. So we're estimating that all of the units would increase by about 20% in size. We believe that we would still retain studios 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, but again, the units would be a little bit larger. This is the same thing. City would be paid back by 2024, pending IDA financing. So walking through this. The first subphase, we have a $5.5 million gap. That's going to be a difficult gap to fill unless the city were willing to look at kind of eliminating the acquisition amount. But that's one way to do it. Again, CDBG funds as well, and potentially increasing the home funds to $2 million. But this is going to be difficult to do. The next subphase also has a gap of about 4.5 million, so a total gap on the two subphases of $10 million. Essentially, that's the city's acquisition price. Yes, I see all of your faces looking at me. Okay, and the final scenario, this is, Councilwoman Quillman, this is basically a scenario we wanted to run for you because I know that you have expressed interest in having the units all demolished, replacing them with townhomes. I think you had referred to Water's Edge on a couple of occasions. I did have the opportunity to speak with John Chow because I think you wanted us to look into potential capital funds. So typically when you work with a housing authority, there are two things that a housing authority can provide. They can provide subsidies, rent subsidies, and they can provide capital funds. We have rent subsidies on all of these units that we're never gonna get kind of a higher rent subsidy than what we're receiving from HUD right now. So that's not something that we would be going to the Joliet Housing Authority for. The second thing is potentially capital funds. CHA, when we work in the city, does provide us with capital funds on all of our deals. Unfortunately, the Joliet Housing Authority, per John Chow, does not have capital funds that they could give to a project of this size or at all. I think they typically do their own developments. Even if they were to be involved with subsidies, they would look for a percentage interest in the partnership, which is something that we typically don't do with housing authorities, although I think that that's kind of their standard means of operating. But there's not an ability to have capital funds here, so we just wanted to get back to you about that.
Thank you for looking into it. It was a thought, and if you don't explore it, people would ask.
We want to explore, and I will tell you, we explore every source possible.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yes, so it was nice to talk to him. So we based this scenario kind of off the same unit square footages that Water's Edge had. So that's 1,200 square feet for a 2-bedroom unit, 1,500 square feet for a 3-bedroom unit. And I do want to point out the site plan that's up here, this was done back in 2014 by Land & Bone Baker. This is not an actual site plan, it's just a representative site plan so that people can kind of see what the vision would be. So walking through this, we would retain 115, or not retain, we would build 115 new construction townhome style units. Those would all be project-based voucher units, and again, a combination of 2- and 3-bedroom units. Construction costs would be similar to a gut rehab, about $200 a square foot. The city purchase price would be paid through both operations and the capital budget, and there would be one phase of redevelopment. So everything would be taken down at once and then constructed new at the same time. This is where we end up on a project of this sort. So there's a gap here of about $24 million. I think some people might be thinking, why is the gap so high? We are doing a townhome development in the city of Chicago right now. The big difference between something like this and the project that we're doing is A, we have the ability to tap into capital dollars from the housing authority, which we don't have the ability to do here. B, there's not an acquisition price that's has to be paid to the Chicago Housing Authority to do a townhome style deal that we're doing right now. So this just makes it all the more difficult with the acquisition and paying it back. Basically, what we're saying is a project of this type couldn't be done here unless the city was willing to walk away from getting repaid its $11.4 million, and we could find some additional money. The final page that we have is a summary similar to when we presented to you all back in 2015. It kind of walks through A, what the scenario is, moving over to the right, to the next column, the total number of units, and again, all of these retain the minimum of 115 units that's required by HUD. The total project costs, as you'll see in scenario 1 and 2, both of those do not necessarily have project costs. Instead, they have capital repairs that will be paid for by the replacement reserve, the funding gap, and then the final column is the estimated city payback year. I think, no. The only scenario that includes legal fees is scenario 2, and that's where we operate it as is. Including an additional $10 million on any of these other redevelopment scenarios will just further increase the gap. It will make it next to impossible to do those, even though I think scenario 4 and 5 are gonna be very difficult to begin with. So what are we looking for from council? I think as all of you know, we have to present to HUD in September of this year a redevelopment plan that we envision. And so in order to get there, we need to host some community meetings with residents and also from the broader community. And then we need to re-engage our architect to kind of come up with some plans or elaborate on the plans that we have here. In addition to kind of picking through our numbers to make sure that we're confident that these numbers are accurate, but we always go back with a fine-tooth comb and go through all of our numbers. So it would be helpful to get feedback on these scenarios, and I think we had talked to David a little bit about this, kind of narrowing this down to 2 to 3 scenarios. 2 would probably be preferable so that we can go out and present those and have a feeling of, or know that council is behind those scenarios. Any questions?
Let me just add to that. And I just want to clarify, the public input phase is critical. And as we've talked, and I think even in some of these small group meetings, inevitably we could be asked questions, well, what does the council think about that? Or what does my council member from my district think about that? So the one question is, does the council want to, say anything about any of the 5, or, give maybe more preference to a short list of 2 or 3, which could be conveyed to the people at the public meetings. It doesn't mean that you have to. You could also let all 5 go, but we all know sometimes the more options you have, the more difficult it is for people to weigh in. And really, because the ultimate objective of the public input phase is bring information back to you as one of the 2 parties that have to recommend the redevelopment plan back to HUD. So prior to September, we'll be back here with input from the public, and then Holston as one partner, the city of Joliet and the governing board as the other, will have to take a vote and say, which of these scenarios do you want to vote on sending back to HUD? So, this is a time really to give some of your preference. Do you want to kind of narrow it? Give any kind of input that Holston can convey in these public meetings, or leave it at the 5? So we're looking for you to guidance and direction as we begin, that public outreach phase of this particular project.
David, I'd just like to add scenario 5, given the funding gap here, I don't even think that's a worthwhile scenario to present to the greater public.
Excuse me.
Oh, sure.
We need to present that one. I was going to mention that should be number 1 on the presentation, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, please.
When this started years ago, it was under the impression, and my impression also, that once we got hold of this, all those buildings would be demolished.
Okay.
And so that's been a question that's been asked over and over and over again. And now over the years, the whole concept has changed. So this question will be asked. So if you start off with this and saying, this is why we can't do this now at this point.
With showing the 25 million, yes.
You have to present that, because that's what people were told. And that's what folks are expecting after they found out that we won the case.
That makes sense.
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think, I'll be very blunt. It's about time the city of Joliet start telling the truth about this, because that was not the case for the first 4 years I was on the city council. You're right. There's talk about marina and sailboats on a shipping canal. So I think it's time we get realistic, and I think Councilman, I agree with you. Let's put the truth out there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
for my input,
Yeah.
one of 9 members, they all should include the 10 million. It's really important that the city be made whole.
Okay.
And we should, moving forward, refer to the $15.065 million price tag, because the fact that we used pent-up CDBG money that was withheld by the federal government from us.
Okay.
That's no different than, I think everybody up here would really want to scalp me if I said the $3 million that we collect on motor fuel tax, we're not going to spread it around the city and help all the city. We're going to do Councilman Hugg's one subdivision with that $3 million. they would not stand for that. They said, no, you need to spread that 3 million across the city.
Okay.
We need to be made completely whole. So the entire city,
The 3.4. I think we need to be upfront with HUD about that, and let them know that it's the city's intent to be paid back, because I do know that they have certain, I don't know how they would
right, that
feel
would be
about that.
incumbent on our staff to take those refunded funds
Yeah.
and apply them according to the regulations under the CDBG program.
Assuming, yeah.
Which they would do, which would meet all the guidelines. But they
they-
would do it throughout the city and not just in the 6-block area.
Okay. We are, and just so all of you know, we're trying to set up a meeting with HUD to talk about some other projects that we're doing, but also to bring this up to look, we're trying to look to them, what exactly do they want us to be presenting them with come September? How detailed of a plan does it have to be? And I think, if you don't mind, we would like to bring up the fact that the city is looking for 15 million to be returned, and also 3.4 of that would be the money, the CDBG money that was used to pay down, because I know that there was talk about that for about
Right, and
6
then
to
I'm sure at
7
that
years.
point, HUD would want to track that as a city.
Right.
We use that money by reassigning it, but you
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying, reassigning it in all 64 square miles.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure it's allowed by HUD,
And
but
then the other
yes,
question is, you met the requirement under the consent decree for 115 units minimum.
yes,
There are also, if I remember, now I'm going off memory, we go back a couple of years, there was part of the consent decree that we had to use reasonable due diligence to assist those being displaced, should they want to stay in Joliet.
Yeah.
What's the cost of doing that?
so relocate, you're asking about relocation?
Counseling
For
and
the first-
relocation is what they call
Relocation
it.
is included in all of our capital budgets. These vouchers are basically, they're portable vouchers, so they can take the vouchers and go elsewhere to the extent that we demolish these units. Peter, you read up on the relocation details in there. I mean, what we've included in here is, there's not a rent differential, but what would be included is moving expenses, utility hookups, things of that sort, packing expenses. So we have estimated in all of these scenarios about $3,500 per family.
And how accurate, confident do you feel in these estimates? As a member of the Public Service Committee, we're very familiar with change orders, aren't we?
So.
You know,
All of these estimates are based off of site plans. They're not based off of architectural drawings. Our general contractors spend months going through any of the drawings that we have in order to price them accurately. What we've included here, the $200 per square foot, we're confident in that. I can't foresee what's gonna happen in the construction industry. There are union wage increases every year. There's sometimes, like right now, lumber is very expensive, steel sometimes spikes. I have no way of knowing that. I'm comfortable as an estimated $200 a square foot, but it could go up until we have actual drawings.
$75 square foot scenario.
The 75 mod rehab, yes, totally. I mean, that might be, and I should say what a mod rehab is. A mod rehab is not going in and fixing all of the mechanicals. A mod rehab is basically going in and doing more aesthetic work throughout, changing out kitchens, tiles in kitchens, tiles in bathrooms, things of that sort. But it's not new appliances.
Everything short of demolishing walls.
Correct, but it's more an aesthetic fix. It's not changing everything out in the building.
So it's essentially new appliances, paint on the walls, and new flooring.
Yeah, but if there's,
Flooring, and
if
if
there's some infrastructure that needs to be replaced, that's in there, but not 100% replacement.
And we should know more too, once these capital repairs are outlined by the 15th, as to exactly what would need to be done.
The other thing I want to mention is we'd like to bid this locally to local general contractors, because I think we can get a better deal than if we pull someone out of Chicago.
Yeah. And for the first two scenarios. Anything that involves Ida is Davis-Bacon, and yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Regarding the estimated payback year that you have listed.
Yeah.
For 3 and 4 and 5, you have a short payback, 2024.
Yeah.
If I understand right, that's just simply when we would get financing. So the city would pay back through the financing, there would still be a 30-year commitment then.
No. So the way these scenarios work is that during the period prior to redevelopment, the city is going to be paid down an estimated about $716,000 a year through operations. At financial closing, we have a portion of whatever is remaining from the acquisition amount included in our capital budget. That would be funded at financial closing. So that full amount, there's going to be a portion that would be funded on the first sub-phase. Let's take, for example, scenario 3. The first subphase that would potentially close in 2021, there would be an amount included in there in the capital budget. So that would be funded at 2021. Then we would still have some remaining buildings that we would still be operating. So that 716 would go down by however many units we reduced or we demolished or rehabbed. And then those would continue paying for operations from 2021, 2022, 2023, and then at financial closing in 2024, the city would be paid in full through the capital budget, the second subphase capital budget.
Right, and then I thought you had financing attached with a 6.5% interest rate. Did I read that correctly?
Correct, so that's a standard, first mortgage, a perm loan essentially.
And that's a 30-year loan.
It's a 30-year loan that's paid back through the redeveloped project. Correct.
And that covers the 34 million project costs.
Correct.
So
A portion of
I guess
that,
what I'm
yes.
saying is, for the paybacks for 1 and 2,
Mm-hmm.
we could do the same thing. We could bond it out theoretically and pay back the bond with the rents we receive. We could be made whole within a matter of months. Correct, David?
Well, you'd also have to have the revenue being generated by the project to pay off the debt service. Would you?
Yeah.
You're
Would
right,
you-
yeah, you could, we could go somewhere and, get a loan based on the cash flow, and then take the city out, and then the project pays back a different lender.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yes.
And following up on this question, because I do remember at the time that this council in a majority vote passed, the purchase and ownership of it, that there was a informal commitment to bonding. I remember, I know what you're referring to. There was a discussion up here. So would that have to be a private bond versus a municipal bond?
Or you're probably talking about a tax exempt bond or a taxable bond, and I'm not sure on that. We'd have to consult bond counsel as
I
to.
mean, we'd have to, I don't know about
I don't know
FHA.
if FHA would do it, based on the present condition, but we could definitely, we could find a fixed rate lender somewhere.
Yeah,
To take out.
I just didn't want, because the dates could be confusing. They aren't necessarily hard dates. There's another way to do it, if we were to choose that option.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we could certainly look at getting the city out, and then we would just, instead of paying the city every month, we'd pay somebody else. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, then the city would still be 50% of the partnership, right?
The city, you're in two positions. You're 50% partner and you're a lender. You lose the lending part, you stay as partner, whatever.
So worst case scenario down the road with the 6.5% for say 5 million, right? If the revenues came up short for some reason, if they didn't meet expectations, who would be responsible for that shortfall?
The project.
The partners of the LLC?
We would try and make that debt not recourse. So the city and Holston would not be on the hook. The project would be on the hook.
Making money here.
So that's normally, we normally do not recourse loans.
And that means what? That
Just-
somebody would take the building away from the
Yeah, the
partnership?
lender would take the property away, worst case.
Question. So kind of picking up on what Mayor Odekirk had said, and scenario 3 kind of seems appealing. I would assume what's going to happen here, we would get paid back through operations, get paid back in 2024, and then the entity, the LLC, would have non-recourse debt to the tune of about $35 million, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
Through capital costs and all that sort of.
the total development cost is 34 million. Some of those are grants and LIHTC equity.
So the entity, the LLC, would have a certain amount of debt
Correct.
in there.
Correct.
Which, and you're saying would,
It's
you'd
not the
probably
full
be
34.
non-recourse debt.
Yeah, it's typically, in these types of deals, especially with the Section 8 rents, that's a pretty much guaranteed income stream, so it would be very reasonable to attract non-recourse debt.
Okay, so what if we,
Doesn't pay back
picking up
our
on what Mayor
legal fees.
Odekirk said, what if we use,
They're gone.
I never
You know.
thought about this until now, but what if we took scenario 1, at closing, took the non-recourse debt, okay, paid back the city, now you've got the non-recourse debt, and use that operating income to do all the renovations, and then maybe get to that scenario 3. Does that make sense?
We could start with scenario 1, and with the voucher income, we could attract non-recourse debt.
Right.
As much as possible.
So then instead of paying back the city, you're paying back the non-recourse, the debt, right? And,
Yes.
yeah, and going through your renovation and reducing the
using our
density
reserve
and,
for renovation.
yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
okay,
Yeah, but there's definitely a possibility of picking up a fixed rate lender
Yeah.
and getting the city out.
Right.
We get 21
but yet
million.
still accomplishing everything in, say, scenario 3, or, you know, that you want to.
Yes.
20, I mean, we'd
I
have
mean,
to.
we, you know,
I'm not looking for an answer right now, I'm just kind of looking.
but that,
we're
we
just
understand the concept.
talking here.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
okay,
actually,
thank you.
yeah, it's 25 million.
Yeah. I don't know
Because
if we can get that
we're,
out.
if we're adding,
Get that out right away. But we can look at it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe you get 75%, or,
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure we can get the purchase price out, perhaps the 15 million.
yeah.
The 10 may have to be on a payment
Oh,
plan.
I wasn't referring to the 10, actually, I was just referring to the 15.
15,
Yeah.
okay.
Any other questions, comments?
I just want to be clear, you made a statement that HUD would be looking for a vision of a project, so it's for September, so it doesn't have to be in concrete, signed, sealed, delivered. This is the scenario that we're going with in September. They're just looking for some type of plan.
Yeah, and that's why we're trying to set up a meeting with them to get clarification on that.
We don't know the answer to your question, but we're trying to get a meeting with HUD so that we can pin them down as to what exactly constitutes a development plan in your eyes.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any follow-up, are there gonna be meetings scheduled with the public?
Well, if I can, I just want to go back to one of the requests they had. I guess the default direction of the council could be, if you don't want to make any motion, would be for Holston to go back and solicit public input on all 5 scenarios. That really doesn't take anything for you. That could be the default if you're maybe undecided. The other option or two could be do something less than 5 scenarios. And we could, you know, if you just want to go with the default and say, go out, give public comment on these, fine, do so. If you want, we could come back, or we could either tonight or in 2 weeks, see if there is a desire, the majority, to consider something less than the 5, then you could take action tonight or maybe in 2 weeks. So again, I just throw that out and see if the council wants them to proceed with all 5 at this time, or would you like to consider narrowing that either tonight or in 2 weeks?
David, I would love to hear the public comment. I would love for that to come back
On all 5?
on all 5.
Okay.
And then go from there.
Okay.
That would be me.
Is that a general consensus of the council, move with all 5, get public input on that?
Question. When you say public input, are you going to have neighborhood meetings? Are you going to have meetings here at the council? How are you going to do that?
Good question. Why
Yeah,
don't you go
so at our meetings with council members, we walked away thinking that we would host probably 1 to 2 meetings on site with residents, and then have also individual meetings with some of the community groups that were mentioned to us. I don't remember the name. I don't have the names of all of them in front of
The
me. but I
neighborhood
think St. John-
associations
St. John's-
over in that area.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think there were
Correct.
3.
There's several.
Yeah, I think there were 3 to 5 that we had written down that we wanted to meet with.
Right.
I suspect then there would likely be a larger meeting open to the community as well.
So they have monthly neighborhood meetings. Why don't you go to the neighborhood meetings? Because those are the 5 stakeholders or 6 stakeholders that live around that area.
Yeah.
And I know that they've been really wanting to know what's going on and put their input in as well. And then if you, an on-site meeting, I don't know, because where would you park? There's no parking.
So the
A lot
on-site,
of people would be there, a lot of people would be
Right.
curious unless you're gonna have like an open house day.
yeah, I think the on-site meetings would be solely for residents, but then we could do a larger one at the, and I always say this wrong, the Billy, is it?
Fremont or Bicentennial Park.
Yes, perhaps do that. We just need to take a look at our calendar and make sure that we have to be able to fit all these meetings in, plus then re-engage, depending on what HUD says, re-engage with our architects to have them draw up some of this stuff.
There's
that we
one
can-
Wednesday night, the Cunningham meeting, and the president's sitting back there.
Yeah,
John
can
Sheridan.
someone, David, maybe you could help us out with that in
Sure.
getting the
That
contact
would-
information for these various groups
Yeah.
so that we could reach out directly?
Yeah,
That would be
we'll
helpful.
definitely.
If you're time constrained, Wednesday night is the first one, 6:30, Cunningham District.
And I also remind, we were also,
Trying to help you out here.
Yes, yes. We will see. Yes, thank you.
we were also thinking of having maybe one public meeting where it would be televised.
Yeah.
So that we could put that on the city's website, so if someone couldn't make one of these meetings, they could watch it.
That as well.
And then send in, written comments to Holston and the city so that we could get that, because, so yes, we'll, be doing that as well, so.
Okay. So after,
And keep in mind, I think during this public education phase, probably in August,
Yeah.
you'll be coming back to the council
Yeah.
with all this input, and that'll be the month when we'll really need to narrow down one scenario.
correct.
that both Holston and the city council wants to recommend to be sent to HUD to meet that September guideline. So that's ultimately where a vote will have to be taken.
Mayor, one quick question here too. If we were to pursue and successfully, because you did use the term probably, or we think, right, on non-recourse debt, you know, outside debt, what's gonna cover the $2.8 million funding gap that you projected? Even under the non-recourse debt scenario?
We'd have to find a way to fill that from something. I mean, we would max out on our hard debt that the project can handle, and then the rest, we gotta find sources for, because it's.
Yeah, the 2.8 million, I mean, a couple of ways. I had mentioned that when we spoke with the head of multifamily over at IDA, they said potentially, you know, for a project of this size, they could go up to $2 million for home funds as opposed to the 1.5 million we're showing there. So that's a total of $1 million, so it reduces that down to 1.7. We can look, I mean, we've explored most of the sources, but we'd have to look at interest rates because obviously that impacts the size of your, you know, your first mortgage. So there's a variety of things we could look to.
And the
to fill that.
The 2.7 goes up by the CDBG, you know, from 11 to 15, right? Because you want 15 back.
Right, that was my
Right.
other question.
That adds to the 2.7.
Okay, and then my other question was, am I oversimplifying the math? That you said the only scenario is 2 that gives us back, makes us really completely whole with $10 million being paid back for our investment through.
Correct.
Yeah,
Could we
otherwise-
add roughly 13 years to each of the scenarios if we expect to pay that $10 million? Is that 13-year differential basically to pay back the extra $10 million?
Well, if you're operating it as is, I mean, we're gonna have to have the debt paid off if that additional 10 million, if,
I think the as-is scenario is gonna have the richest cash flow.
Right.
And the most likelihood of getting the quickest way to pay back the debt.
So the first 2 scenarios would be 13 years roughly extra. The other ones could be longer.
Yes.
Because you're reducing the number of
Reducing
units.
the number of units, cash flow's lower.
Could be 15, could be 18 years additional. Okay, thank you.
okay,
So-
Thank you.
thank you.
Next is citizens to be heard on agenda items. Is there anyone present that would like to speak on an agenda item this evening?
Agenda items, yes.
Good afternoon. I just want you to keep in mind that some of you weren't on the city council at that time. I've been around. Mike Turk knows that, and Jan Quillman knows that. And most people that were opposing this was Kappa, which is not even near there. We have demolished some of our buildings at the Housing Authority. I can tell you not one single time do we get an inquiry by Kappa or any other organization to demolish or have any concern about those residents who were living in public housing. But they were concerned about what was going on over at, on Broadway Street. And I was the one that was on Councilman Brophy's committee to elect him in 1995. And his sole purpose was bigotry, to get rid of those people. And to me, that's disgusting. So make sure that when you have these meetings that you're taking good input from the community because they truly care about the people and not just because they want to get rid of them because of the color of their skin. Because I can tell you, we have demolished at Des Plaines. We're going to demolish at Fairview. Not one single resident of Kappa or any of these other organizations has attended a Housing Authority of Joliet meeting to express their opinion about the concern of those residents. or their safety or well-being. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, good evening. My name is John Urban. I'm the attorney for the petitioners on Council Memo number 3 under ordinances and resolution. I'm sorry, number 2, 613 North William Street. And I'm making a request to have this set over until the City Council meeting on June 19th. I just learned it was on the council agenda on Friday. I believe that was gonna be up on the 18th and 19th, so I'm requesting it be set over to the 19th. That will give us time also to meet with the representatives of CAPA to see if we can work out a resolution before the next city council meeting. So,
David, does staff have an issue if we table this tomorrow night?
No, we would not.
All right, the vote will be tomorrow to table.
oh, tomorrow's the, okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I'm not sure this issue of Riverwalk apartment complex is even an agenda item tonight. So I don't know if I'm legally standing up here addressing a agenda item or not, because Open Meeting Act states that the information should be public knowledge before X amount of time. Generally, I think your cutoff date's Thursday at noon to get stuff out for the council meeting. So I caution you to vote on it tomorrow night, because you can't vote tonight, because it wasn't presented to the community in a properly timely fashion. Also, public input would be very important. But for example, myself on the Cunningham meeting in July, for example, we can't have one because it's July 4th. So we're getting down to the time limit of September. So maybe a large meeting would be more important than a couple of community neighborhood meetings, just my opinion.
And Mayor, just for clarification, the Riverwalk is not on tomorrow night's agenda, so there will be nothing to vote on.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Hello, my name is Damon Stunich. I live at 430 North Center Street, lifelong Joliet resident. Commenting regarding the Holston plans. Didn't have much time to prepare for this. I have a few comments regarding these plans. From the 5 plans I've seen, it really amounts to no change, no improvement to the near west side, incredibly costly to the city. But the bigger problem I see is these plans fail to include any stakeholders from the area. The city, speaking of this, City of Joliet website lists numerous plans for a Greenway Parkway going back to the 1921 plan. In 1921, it called for a beautiful park on the west side of the river. The plan was well thought out and it extended to Bridge Street. It was actually quite far-sighted if anyone would take the time to read it. The 1990 Joliet City Development Plan had a steering committee of over 40 influential members of the community. It called for a park greenway all the way to Bridge Street. That plan called for Evergreen Terrace to be redeveloped as owner-occupied townhouses with a common central green space, as it had good views of the canal and cityscape. That's a plan 28 years ago. They were already talking about redeveloping it. The 2007 Near West Side Plan included 14 different organizations. The key strategy of the 2007 plan was to further improve and enhance the Near West Side. That plan again included a riverfront greenway park all the way to Ruby Street, or extended past Ruby Street to Granite. So dating back almost 100 years, there's been a plan for redevelopment of the Near West Side along the river to Park and Greenway. From what I understand, neither Holston nor the city planning staff reached out or sought input from the community within the past 2.5 years. We've all been waiting for something on this, and this has been sprung up on us in a very short manner without time really to think about it. I would encourage the city council to do 2 things. First, seek an impartial, unbiased input as to the future redevelopment of Evergreen Terrace from local stakeholders and lifelong Joliet citizens. And two, look to the past plans for guidance. I'm worried that the Holston plan will become the basis for any future decision-making, and the city council will be overly influenced by the cost associated with this plan. Just like the 2007 plan strategy, let's make sure the future plan improves and enhances the near west side. This plan needs local input by Jolietans who do care about what the future could look like. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could respond, thank you for your comment, but there is an issue there. You're citing plans that happened before the settlement with HUD. And that's really crucial to understand what happened with Evergreen Terrace. The settlement that the city reached, I think in 2012, is that correct? Tied the city's hands in a way that made this unfeasible, but the Greenway, the Parkway, it's not possible.
From what I understand, in that plan, the HUD plan, and I've read that plan a few times, it called for 115 units to be located anywhere within the city of Joliet. It didn't say that Evergreen Terrace would have to have that. And correct me if, legal counsel could look at that, but that's right, what I read in that plan.
Right, and that's a cost. I mean, if we can't afford to do it on site, how is the city gonna build 115 new units somewhere?
From what I understand, that could be Section 8 certificates.
No, but the city,
Maybe I'm wrong.
The city would be responsible for building the property, for acquiring the property, building the property, maintaining the property, either on site or somewhere else in the city. And that's a 20-year commitment we'd have to make. On top of that, you talked about a greenway all the way to Bridge Street. That's not possible. The property that ends at Division, everything north of there is public housing, it's housing authority.
I'm very aware of that, but on the other side, that plan, if you look at the old plans, they did call for that.
Right, our hands are tied by the settlement with HUD, significantly tied, which is, again, to go back down memory lane, that's where I really became a vocal opponent of this, and the city council. Became apparent to me that what was initially promised in 2005, the city was never gonna be able to deliver on. And you're seeing the results of that today. I think Holstein, these plans are much better than the ones they presented 2 years ago. But, I don't see, I agree with you, I don't see a very good option there either. The idea of leveling that site and building somewhere else, it's a cost to the city, it's gonna bankrupt the city of Joliet, in my opinion. If anyone disagrees, the time to speak up is now, and send it back to the planning board for more plans.
Well, I would just chime in, and I'm not disagreeing. Any plan anybody wants to come up with is doable if we have 30, 50, 100, 200 million. We don't, and nor is it wise to spend it on that. What people were told for the first 10 years, maybe at first it was somewhat accurate prior to new regulations that were devised by HUD, but it became apparent, even prior to myself being elected, and Mayor Odekirk and Terry and the rest of the new folks, that was out the window. There was gonna be no green space because it'd be too cost prohibitive. We'd have to buy up, if you wanna go all the way up, like you say, we'd have to buy up the public housing property if they were willing to sell, and give them property somewhere else. I mean, anything can be done for 100 million. We don't have it. I know that people sometimes get irritated with myself, and maybe with the mayor, especially as a councilman, when we were being vocal. We're just telling you the truth. And it's high time that you get told the truth. It was frustrating to not be able to give you truth prior to the end of the case, because we have a legal fiduciary responsibility, even if we disagree, to not undercut a city lawsuit. So when it was still being litigated up until a year and a half ago, we couldn't say anything publicly, but I tried my best to telegraph it.
Yeah, and I'd add one thing, and you obviously are well versed on this. I would ask you to reconsider reading the Inspector General report that was published about 3 years ago. We can put it back on the website. He went in great detail, went back on the record in executive session, at meetings, and detailed over and over again how staff would not answer council people's questions or were presenting information that was contrary to what was being accurate. Different things were being said publicly than privately, and he went back, again, a very detailed report. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. But again, I'll open it up because I don't think there's any disagreement that what we're looking at today is not the grand plan that people wanted back in 2005. I think we all agree with that. If someone on the council thinks there's a better avenue forward than the 5 plans we're proposing, or not that were proposed to us tonight, you have to speak up right now, and we will send Holstein back to the drawing board. Otherwise, we have to start moving forward.
We can't wait. I mean,
We can't do it.
our hands are pretty much still tied.
This is it.
But they're gonna have input in on these scenarios.
Exactly.
You can tweak the scenarios, yes?
Right, and I agree with your comment earlier about putting it out there, but I do think the issue with the lawsuit can't be, overstated. And Marty, you're gonna have to be at these meetings, explain the legal position that Joliet's in. It's not a good position, but, it's a position that the council has voted to put ourselves in. So I think you're gonna have to explain to people why what they may wanna see happen just legally cannot happen right now.
I just will have one more comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, because you and I were here back then. The way it was originally sold was we would get possession of the building, and we had to prove to HUD that we did have scattered site housing throughout the city. And they identified different properties, so instead of us having to build new places, people were going to have vouchers. They could go anywhere in the country, or they could go to any home that was available through the scattered housing, site housing through the city of Joliet.
Exactly.
And that's what was in folks' head, and that's what stayed in everybody's head until all this other stuff, because it went on for so long, that was kind of forgotten about and has changed since then. So just, that's why a lot of the folks are still wanting to know what happened to that plan.
Understood.
But our hands are tied now.
Mayor?
And go ahead. No, I agree with what Jan said, and the scenarios that were presented tonight, I think, some of them, I think the one thing is gonna reduce density, and that's a big thing, if it's gonna remain there. And the other thing is that it's going to, it certainly is gonna be managed a lot different than it was before. For security, for the living conditions, and I think, you know, the one showed, 117 units, I think it was, or something like that. It's gonna be managed a lot different than what's there now. So.
Marty, what's the repercussions if we were to fail to present a development plan by the September deadline?
I think we would be in breach of the agreement.
Would that be in contempt?
I wouldn't want to put the city in that position to find out.
So let's just say it's pretty serious business.
Yes.
Okay, so, this wasn't rushed by any member of this council necessarily. So, you know, if you felt like it was like last minute and rushing. This is HUD, or I should say the court, telling us we have to have it by September. And I think Councilman Morris alluded to the fact that whatever we present to him is an outline. It could get worse and it could get better.
I'm Bob Noctree with Kappa. I just have a question. I'm gonna sound like a ignoramus, but I have read the settlement and I don't find any reference to a September requirement for a plan. I have the whole settlement except for the exhibits, but I don't see it anywhere in here. Where is it?
Might be in a court order.
It was a year from takeover, we had to present a plan. It's in a court order, or if not in the actual settlement, but the court has ordered the city within a year of acquiring the property. We took it over a year ago to come forward with a redevelopment.
I was gonna make an offer if it's in the settlement and I missed it, I was going to polish Mr. Hug's shoes.
We won't make you do that.
I thought you were gonna make an offer to buy it.
Well, you know, and that's an interesting point, Marty. We could make a motion to extend that, but again, I don't know of any other viable option. No one's bringing anything else forward. I'm not saying you should, but would you have an legal opinion on that?
I'd have to take a closer look at it.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could, one thing that we might want to consider if Marty has the time, and that is before these public meetings, have as simple as we could, not too lengthy, but a frequently asked questions and answers. Because even, you know, being here 6 months, I've heard so many different variations and sometimes misinformation. It might be helpful for everyone attending these to just understand some of the basic statements of facts, of the chronology or something like that, to help them understand, as the city has, you know, what's happened in the last year or two since the settlement, and what we have control over, what we don't have, and what we're trying to accomplish, and how does that have an impact with previous plans or previous elected official statements, much of which is contained in the Inspector General's document. But again, that's a very long document. So we'll talk internally about something like that could be prepared to help, I think, the public prior to them giving, comments on these 5 scenarios.
I just have one more comment.
Sure.
From day one, I have already said, this was a quality of life issue for me, and if you don't believe me, you can go back and look at the tapes, listen to read the minutes, because I do live in the Cathedral area. However, the good that did come out of this was the Quality of Life Task Force from District 4 and 5, and we did have input, and we had so many more neighborhood organizations formed and come together as a unit. East side, west side, south side, north side. And that's the good part of this, because everybody is concerned about quality of life, not just for themselves, but for everyone. And that is why, when I did meet with these folks, with Holston, I brought up the fact of Water's Edge. And I said, why couldn't we do something like that? Why couldn't we make a partnership with them? And that's what they went back and looked at to see if we could do it. But according to Ida, that was just not an option for us. So, because those are beautiful townhomes. If no one's been over there, you should really look at them. They're really nice. They're maintained very well. And it's almost like it's pride of ownership. When people live there, it's something nice and they want to take care of it. And if you've ever taken the tour of Evergreen Terrace, especially a couple of those buildings, you would know what I'm talking about. And it is overcrowded, it is very dense. And hopefully we can get to a part where everybody's in agreement with what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it, and give folks a better place to live, period. That's all I'm gonna say.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Richard Kavanaugh. I'm an attorney with offices at 111 North Ottawa Street here in Joliet. I'm here tonight because Tom Osterberger, one of my partners, represents a gentleman, Marcelino Gutierrez, who has a case before you tomorrow night. Mr. Osterberger can't be here because he's in Plainfield tonight because Mr. Hansen, who is another one of our attorneys, was inducted before the Supreme Court of the United States this morning, so he's out of town. I think Mr. Osterberger or Mr. Hansen will be here tomorrow night. Basically, Mr. Gutierrez bought some property at 701 North Plainfield last October. It's a former service station. It was a gasoline station that was built probably 1940, 1945. That building was converted later on to a communications facility and has been closed for perhaps 8 or 10 years now. Mr. Gutierrez is a resident of Joliet and he is a successful businessman. He owns a similar facility, which he's been operating for at least 6 years in the city of Crest Hill, just northwest of this site on Plainfield Road. He bought this building to open a second tire repair and sales store. And not checking sufficiently the zoning has found out that he needs a variance and a special use permit to get it. He appeared before your zoning board of appeals and they turned him down. We're here to ask you to overturn the decision of the zoning board of appeals and to allow him to open his tire shop. There were some suggestions by staff as far as conditions on the special use permit that it seems to me make a lot of sense. This is a building that, again, that has been vacant for 6, 8, 10 years, okay? One of the things he could do is open an ice cream shop there. Well, he's not gonna open an ice cream shop, but that's one of the things that you could do in a B1 district on this site. The site is a mile south on Plainfield Road of 6 corners. And I call this mini 6 corners because, again, there are 6 streets that intersect here. Plainfield Road, Wilcox, and Mason. So this is a good use. He has experience. He is a successful businessman. And we think it would be appropriate to overrule the ZBA and would need a 2/3 vote of this council to do so. but to overrule the ZBA and allow him to open up his tire shop with conditions as expressed or as suggested by the staff. We're here to answer any questions, and either Tom or Mike, who are far more familiar with this than I, will be here tomorrow night too.
Questions?
Isn't this just comments? We haven't gone through yet. Okay.
I got a quick question. This is probably for the staff, but I know this facility's been vacant for maybe about 6-7 years. Are there any plans to make any improvements to the facility?
He would be doing some things that staff had suggested as conditions. In other words, closing off one of the entrances off of Wilcox Street, putting some additional plantings and grass at the south end of the triangle there, making it a safer place for anybody who is just traveling by or who is walking the neighborhood.
So some additional landscaping, some public safety
Additional
improvements.
landscaping, et cetera, right.
Public safety improvements. Okay, thank you.
Just one question. And I know a little bit about that, beautifying that area, which it really needs right there to have that. But just one question about the business itself. And I know you said it's just changing tires.
It's changing, repairing tires and putting new tires on, right.
And so there will be no fumes or anything like that emanating out into the neighborhood from?
No, ma'am.
You can kind of, tell me that quick, because I'm asking the question because that was something that was a concern. And I couldn't see from changing tires where fumes will be emanating from the building. But, and then there will be no testing of the cars or,
no testing on local streets. I think that was part of the staff's
That's part of the
recommendations.
Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you.
No, that lot's not very big.
No, sir, it's not.
Is there gonna be any cars, parked on that lot?
Oh, there are 2 employees who will be at the lot. One of them carpools with the other to get there. We're looking at creating 4 parking spaces on the site. Cars are brought into the 2 bays. The tires are removed, repaired, or replaced, and then they come out and the people leave with the cars. So
at any given time, how many, what would you say?
3, 4 people on site, maybe 5.
Excuse me. According to the zoning board, you have three employees, and there's not enough parking. So if you have 3 employees and you have people with cars, there's nowhere to park.
You have
Parking on the street. I'm very familiar with the area, okay? And there's a 2-bay garage, and there will be overnight vehicles at times that are going to be kept over inside the garage. So if you have 2 inside and you got your employees coming, how are they gonna get out of there? Where's the space? And number 3, according to our ordinance, for this particular type business, you have to be 100 feet away from residential, and this is only 45 feet away from residential.
That's correct. It's only 45
Right.
feet. So
There's another building right up the street, just to the west of that property that has been empty, which would be more conducive to this type of business. And that building has been empty for quite some time. And I'm sorry that when the building was purchased, your client didn't do due diligence and check the zoning.
I'm sorry he didn't do it either. He does own the building now, okay? There is parking for 4 vehicles. Mr. Gutierrez is the owner. There will be 2 employees on site.
So you're saying the zoning board thing was wrong? It says 3 here.
Including him.
I think it included Mr. Gutierrez.
So that's 3 parking spots, and there's not enough parking.
No, one of the employees carpools with the second employee. And Mr. Gutierrez will be moving back and forth between this store and the store 3 miles north on Plainfield Road.
But you're not gonna have enough off-street parking for people with their vehicles that are coming in and out.
There would be enough. You have parking in the 2 bays and 2 additional parking places on the site, ma'am.
Well, I read the whole thing, so I'm not in agreement with it.
Understood.
Question. What will be done to mitigate, to protect the residents there? Like you said, there'll be no fumes, like Councilwoman Gavin said, but and hydraulic hair gun is very, very noisy. And I'm assuming you're not gonna be changing tires by hand, you're gonna be using
You're
hydraulic.
not changing by hand, no.
So what will be done, I mean, is there gonna be a requirement that the work be done only with the doors closed? Because you know, when you go past the garage and you're changing tires,
Yes,
if you have to listen to that all day, it can get under your skin.
Yes, I mean, it's two kinds of types of air guns. I mean, the air guns is all, I mean, the new ones is electric. It's more, it's no noisy, no nothing.
We have two amounts.
And the other question is, I happen to run into Tom at the bank, and I believe you have 3 entrances, one off of 30, and then one off of each street behind it, right?
That is correct.
And Tom
There
had
is
said-
one off of 30 and 2 off of Wilcox.
Right, and there was one that was proposed to be closed.
That is
And Tom
correct.
said it was possible that there might be agreement to close both of the Wilcox and make it a Route 30 only.
That would make maneuvering on the site a little difficult, but if that were what was necessary to get the council to approve it, I would talk with our client and find out, and he'll be prepared to answer that question tomorrow night.
And, well, I would suggest to see if that, you know, that's just my question.
I hear
don't
you.
speak, but you probably should have the answer ready for tomorrow. And then the only other question I have is concerns about parking are real. I understand you have 3 people that will be employed there. Mr. Gutierrez and 2 other people that I believe, if I read it right, they're relatives and they ride together.
They carpool.
But where's the gear? I mean, is there something in the ordinance saying that they always have to carpool? What happens if one of them quits? You're gonna get a new employee. Aren't we setting ourselves up to solve a problem here?
My name is Denise, and I'm helping Mr. Gutierrez with this. It's not that he didn't do his due diligence, the property was listed as vacant. It was a failure to the people who represented him at the time to advise them. That was brought up before closing. It was said that it was an easy way to get a variance.
Okay, so he was obviously misled.
Yes.
And I think everybody up here is trying to find a way
And
to make it work.
jobs, it's from 10 to 15 minutes. He gets on an average 6 to 7 clients a day. He does have the other facility that he can tour clients that come to this Plainfield property to go get service over there, and he's willing even to do service based on appointments. He's willing to work with you guys as long as you allow him the chance to do his business.
And I appreciate that and respect that. I guess my question is, right now we're saying we can make 3 or 4 parking spaces work because 2 employees have 1 car.
Right.
One of those employees could quit. He's gonna have to hire somebody else.
Correct.
That could be another
He
car.
does live near the facility and he has a large driveway. He is willing to make them commute and park over there to the point that they only drive 1 vehicle.
So to walk from his house.
It's just family members, really, that work with him, and he's saying he will have 1 vehicle on site for employees to commute from his house to the property, which is only 5 minutes away.
And is that in the proposed?
It was not as far as I know, but again, I'm here covering, so.
That might be something else to look at too, to have that put in.
I hear you.
I do have another question. Kendall, this is for you. B3 business, if this was changed to B3 business, what other businesses qualify for B3?
B3, of course, is our highest use commercial district. You could do a gas station in a B3 zoning, restaurants, of course. Pretty much all sorts of commercial uses are allowed in a B3. When it comes to car repair, that's allowed in B3 as well, but you need a special use permit, and that's why they're before us.
Right, but if it's already zoned B3, it goes with the property, correct?
Correct.
The special zoning?
Correct.
So my concern is, if we were to grant this, because it's just a change of tire, and the business fails, it's already zoned B3, the special use permit goes with business, correct, with the property, correct? Is that what you just said?
Well, actually, they've got B1 zoning.
No, wait, I know it's zone B1. I'm saying if it were to change to B3.
We're not asking that it be changed to B3.
You speak in the mic, please?
I'm sorry, we're not asking that it be changed to B3.
That's my
We're
understanding.
asking that it be,
That's my
that
understanding.
we get
You're
a
asking-
special use for a B3 use.
Right, Mayor and members of the council.
But doesn't
if I
that
could-
special use go with the
I
property?
can clarify. They're asking for a variation of use and a special use permit. So the underlying zoning of B1 would not change. If the special use permit is approved, that would run with the property as long as a subsequent owner would utilize the property the same way. If there's any change from that, then that makes that special use permit null and void.
So the gas station couldn't go in there?
Correct. Gas station could not, because that's a B3 use and that would be a B1, and this is a B1 zone.
So we're not asking for the zoning change, because that's what I was reading, that they wanted the zoning change with the variance to put that in there. And it was always my understanding, I was always told, because I was on the zoning board, that the special use permit goes with the property.
That is correct.
Any questions?
Thank you for your attention.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on an agenda item?
Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Alan Waits, and I'm here on behalf of Verizon Wireless, speaking on the agenda item to amend the existing special use permit to allow a tower extension on the existing flagpole located at 1630 Essington Road. Verizon has deficiencies in that area, and they want to install, they'd like to install on that tower. And there's no current open canisters on the flagpole tower, so that's why we're seeking an extension of 18.5 foot. I'm here to answer any questions.
Comments, questions? Quick question. I think that's by Semino's, right?
Yes.
Semino's, and we do need, we get some drop spots out there. We need some more coverage out there. So what do you bring in your toolkit farther west even? Because we get some bad coverage out there.
Well, Verizon constantly monitors their network, and that's proprietary information. And
so it is being looked at.
Oh yeah, they're constantly monitoring the network, and they've identified this area. And this, if they were to get this extension, their antennas would reach about a mile in all directions. So I don't know how.
Councilman, if I could, I'm going to add a little bit to this. I'm in talks with the Verizon rep, and we're actually collecting data right now from PD and fire department of dropped cell coverage. So again, it's a big organization. You may not know this, but we're collecting very detailed intersections where Verizon is dropping because it's a public safety issue. Of course, it's a nuisance to the residents as well. So we're hoping to fix all of these black areas within the Joliet proper. So I'm working with Anthony, he's our rep, and I can talk to you afterwards about it. But,
And to be fair, it's gotten better in the far west.
it is, but like 6 corners drops, these guys are in fire trucks, they're going through and all of a sudden their maps go blank. So there's definitely some areas we need to fix with the Verizon, and it's on their radar. But these are the kind of things that, frankly, we're gonna have to have some give and take on where they need to put these cells.
And it's a flagpole tower. It'll
You
hardly
guys did
be
a great job
noticeable.
with it. It looks nice. And Semino's does a great job. Is that their flag that's up there?
It's SBA owns the tower, and T-Mobile owns the lease area on the ground. So
Always have
SBA
a nice, huge flag up there. It's nice. It looks nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? And then we'll pass it to the city manager to discuss tomorrow night's agenda items.
Mayor and council, tomorrow night on our city council agenda, first let me go through after the citizens to be heard on agenda items. We'll have a number of council committee reports, CTIS, diversity and community relations, public safety, public service, and stadium. All but a few have been held, so there will be a couple of more of these meetings held tomorrow to present and then present their recommendation. I'll kind of make a reference to those. In the consent agenda for tomorrow night, besides the very typical approval of minutes, there is a very significant settlement agreement, but we sometimes refer to this as the Marconi litigation settlement that is right now showing on the consent agenda. You should have a full copy of that settlement agreement. The positive is that very shortly, we anticipate the judge will give final approval to this settlement agreement, and then it'll be a matter of the city council giving its final approval, and then we proceed for both the signature of the mayor on that agreement and then the disbursement of funds as agreed to in that particular document. Following that, also in the consent, there would be position vacancies. Stopping at that point, is there any questions to that point, especially on the consent agenda and the Marconi settlement agreement? If not, under licenses and permit, we have two items tomorrow dealing with the Taste of Joliet. The first will be just approval to hold a carnival June 22nd through June 24th at the Joliet Memorial Stadium for the Taste of Joliet. I don't anticipate there's any questions on that. There will be no public hearings tomorrow. Under ordinances and resolutions, the first ordinance we've just previously had discussion on is the ordinance regarding 701 Plainfield Road. We heard some discussion. I just want to remind the council that the Zoning Board of Appeals, which heard this matter back on April, I think it's 17 or 19, voted to deny both the variation of use and the special use permit, which the city administration concurred with. This has been postponed several times for the applicant and their attorney to be here. So again, this will be on the agenda tomorrow. Any further questions on the dialogue, discussion you've had?
David, do you know what the vote count was at the zoning board?
Yes, the initial motion was to approve the applicant's request, but there was only 2 aye votes for that. The nay votes were 5, so it failed the motion to approve. 5 were opposed. 2 to 5. Moving on to Council Memo 29218. This variation of use, continuation 2-unit, an R3 zone in an R2 zoning district at 613 North William, but this is the one that the applicant has requested be postponed to June 19th. So that will so be recommended tomorrow night. Just so you are familiar, the ZBA heard this matter on May 17th. It was a unanimous ZBA decision to not deny the applicant's request, and administration is also recommending denial for the reasons so stated in the backup report. There was no votes in favor of that matter. And the last council memo in this section, ordinance approving a first amendment to a special use permit to increase the height of an existing cell tower by an additional 18 feet located at 1630 Essington Road. We heard some public comment. The ZBA on May 17th voted 6 aye votes in favor, and the administration also supports this. So it was unanimous in favor with no votes from the ZBA. Turning to the public, or to the resolution section, let me mention that the Public Service Committee tomorrow will take up the first 2 council memos, 29518, 29618. One is to appropriate motor fuel tax funds and the appropriate resolution for the Juniper Street, Richmond Street roadway project in the amount of $432,557.30. And then there will also be a Public Service Committee consideration of a resolution approving a lease agreement for the food and beverage space at the Gateway Center train station with John, and I may not pronounce this correctly, Georgios, I think the former operator of the Route 66 diner, for $500 a month. It's my recollection that this is for a 5-year with a potential for extensions, but with the right of either party to terminate on a certain set period of time as stated in the agreement. Before I go on, let me just see if there's any questions you have, especially of the lease agreement for food beverage service at the Gateway Center train station. If not, moving on, the last item in this section, which the Public Safety Committee will discuss tomorrow night. The Joliet Park District has requested that a new resolution be authorized that will place in detail that the city of Joliet will this year provide for up to $40,000 in Joliet police services. This is a slight increase over last year. I couldn't find the last year figure, but I think it was $35,000. So it's a $5,000 increase. Keep in mind, above the $40,000 in the Joliet Park District pays for those services at the agreed upon rate. So that'll come to you tomorrow with a public safety recommendation. But in the meantime, is there any questions from the council? Moving on to the section on bids and contracts. First, let me take up item number 1. This is a request for authorization to amend the 2018 budget and award a contract for municipal enforcement software relating to adjudication. This agreement, this software would be with IT Stability Systems in an amount not to exceed $266,800. The CTIS committee met briefly before this meeting and has asked for Dave Brainer, IT director, to come forward and just give a few overview comments on this software and some of the discussion and why the recommendation is to approve this software agreement. Mr. Brainer. And we'll excuse him if he's a little under the weather. Horse, I, and many other people throughout the city have come down with a virus, something. So we appreciate him staying here tonight. Many are struggling with this illness.
Update? Same one. Okay.
It's updated version.
I just added some lines to the expense. I blew out the expense section of it.
Okay.
So what you're looking at in front of you is a model for adjudication. It's got various sections in it, but the first is upfront expenses. And just to clarify the way the memo was written, we budgeted $200,000 for adjudication. It was a stab in the dark about a little bit over a year ago when we were trying to figure out what this thing would run. The final number came to 266, but that includes some upfront consulting to help us guide through this. It includes some hardware that we're going to need to buy. There's a downstroke with IT Stabilities, which is $67K, but you're going to see IT Stabilities is going to get paid again. I'll talk about that in a moment. So the upfront, including a contingency budget, because there's still some questions on the interface work that we're going to need to do with this, because this is pretty complicated stuff. There's a lot of moving parts with this project. What we're basically doing is we're bringing a software package in that's going to go in all the squads. The neighborhood services are going to be using this, and that's what we're going to be writing all the citations in the city with the software package. All of that is going to go to one of two places. It's either going to go to the county if it's a state violation, and if it's a local violation, via all those ordinances that Marty updated, it's going to fall into our domain here, which then means we need to adjudicate it. So it means that this chamber here turns into a hearing chamber for all citations that are non-moving, that are not non-moving. Okay, the NyQuil is really kicking in now. So probably the most important thing to focus on here is the reoccurring. So the reoccurring on this looks like it's going to be expense-wise on this, about $178K. What we're also looking for, though, on the revenue side of this is about $1.27 million. So we're looking at a delta on an annual basis of roughly a little bit over $1 million. What does this mean to the citizens of Joliet? It means a lot of great things. Because the way this works is that if somebody gets a $100 ticket, they're going to come here and they're going to get adjudicated at $100. In today's world, that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of fees, there's a lot of fines that are associated with things that are processed down at the county. And they're also going to get adjudicated a lot faster. We're also going to have some other things like, for example, online adjudication. So we're going to have the ability to adjudicate over the web that allow people to maybe stay at work if they want to challenge a violation or something like that. So bottom line is of the $267K that we got to put down to make this happen, the break even is about 5 months. So we'll see that money back very quickly. And the 5-year cash flow, which is in that big box in the bottom, it works out to be a significant sum of money, over $4 million after about 5 years. There are some business assumptions that are going along here. So we don't know exactly how some of these things are going to go. We're looking at about 22,000 violations. We think the violation count will increase a little bit just because it's going to be easier now to actually do some processing on the side of when they're actually doing the citations. But overall, while these citations are actually being written, every time there's a citation written and there's a hearing, there is a charge that goes back to the city of Joliet for using the software. So when you see SaaS, that's software as a service, that's also going back to IT stabilities as well. The other assumption in this business model is that we're at a collection rate of 75%. Today, that is not the case. You worked separately with a project. Jim Gandati and I have been working very closely, and he's been working with a different collections vendor. So we are going to we're doing that right now at the same time. So you're going to see our collections rate rise to the industry average of 75%. We're hoping better than that. Bottom line is this model is not new. It's new to Will County, but it's not new to DuPage County. It's not new to Cook County. This has been going on for almost a decade in these other counties. We just happen to be the first down here. Do you have any questions on this model?
Can I just add one other item that I didn't recall to bring it up in the committee, but I think one thing, we do look at some of the costs that is spent right now, but one of the major costs, I think the reason adjudication has become more localized is because the high cost of enforcement is borne at the local level. When you look at 22,000 citations a year, who is paying for the law enforcement to go out and to write those citations? Our taxpayers do. And unfortunately, there's been a pattern that without local adjudication, little of that fine revenue comes back to the city of Joliet to cover our costs of police officers and others who bear even probably a much greater share of the cost in law enforcement than ever to be recovered from fines and revenues. But I just want to throw that out, that this is an ongoing effort to keep justice and the hearing officer at a very local level, but it's also intended to help recover more of the full cost of even, issuing these citations, which has never been, a full objective of fines and revenues of the justice system. But this takes us another step closer to recovering more of those costs. Thank you.
David, what kind of citations are we looking at? What's the gamut?
The gamut is anything from tall grass to kids smoking weed to a broken windshield to paint chipping or paint on the side of the house that's coming down or something like that.
Any traffic violations?
Yeah, any
non-speed.
So if it's a moving violation by state statute, it has to go to the county because they have a feed from there down to the state of Illinois driver's license, the driving record. So we cannot adjudicate those types of violations. But if somebody's not wearing their seatbelt, if somebody's got a tail light out, something of that nature, yes, we can. We can write that as a local ordinance, local violation. Parking, of course, falls under any of the parking violations fall under this. So it's pretty much anything that's that is outside of the non-moving, or outside of the moving violation world. Which is a lot. I mean, and the truth of the matter is other communities are doing that. With the community that we spent a lot of time in and we've been in a lot of communication with is Elgin. And we spent a day up there watching the whole process from left to right. And if it's done correctly and you have the right software and you've thought through things correctly and you've communicated correctly, it works quite well. And people are in and out of there very quickly. I sat and watched 70, 80 people go through a court process in under 2 hours. It was amazing. And I can tell you that's not necessarily the case in other courtrooms.
So we really need to codify as many, infractions, if you will, be it traffic, whatever, that are not moving, so that it becomes all local. So it's the money's ours, if we don't have a current ordinance.
I think the idea here is that, you write the violation that's appropriate for the infraction. What's really cool with this is it gives the officers some options that they don't have today. So they can lean on some of these local ordinances if they choose to. If it's not appropriate and it needs to be a more serious offense and something like that, they can choose to do that as well. I think give your option. So you're going to see, I want to be clear on this. So we budgeted 200, and so what we're looking for is a 66K increase to the budget. But the good news is before the year is out, if I did my homework right and I did my math, and I did that before I took the NyQuil, you're going to see you'll see the payback on it. Okay, so this is a project that's unlike normal IT project. I come in, I always want to spend money. Now I'm spending money, and we'll actually see some money coming back. So, and I think really, to be honest, this is the best thing for the citizens of Joliet. If they get a $100 ticket, they're going to pay $100. When you pay $100 over the county is a different story. It turns into $200, turns into $250 because of all those fees. We're not doing that to the people. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, guys.
Go get some sleep.
Okay, if there's no other questions, and just so you know, the committee voted 2-0 to recommend that approval. Moving on, item 2, under award of contracts, Council Memo 318 is award of a contract for the Juniper Street, Richmond Street roadway project, $443,319.80, to be discussed tomorrow. The Stadium Committee, just before this minute, took up Council Memo 30118, request to authorize the purchase of pavilion materials from Park Recreation Inc. in the amount of $48,875 for the Joliet Route 66 baseball stadium. This is just for the materials. Labor will be provided by Joliet Park District and city employees. The vote there was 2-0. The Council Memo 30218 and Council Memo 30318 will be discussed at the Public Safety Committee tomorrow. The former is for a sewer root control program contract awarded Duke's Root Control Inc. in the amount of $99,085.50. And the latter, 30318, is for the purchase of a Ford utility all-wheel drive for the fire department for $32,395. Is there any questions on any of those 4 items I mentioned? On Council Memo 30418, this is back on May 15th. The Finance Committee reviewed, made a recommendation for approval. There is 2 contracts here. The first is a contract with healthcare and workmen's compensation consulting services with Gallagher Benefit Services for $76,000 for 1 year of healthcare consulting services. And I believe that you have a copy of that contract. Is Kathy still here? I don't think so. There is a contract that was passed out. There is a second contract, and I don't believe that you have this in your packet. We'll get that to you tomorrow. The second one is for a 3-year agreement with Healthcare Consulting Services for Workmen's Compensation Insurance Program Consulting Services. The one thing I do want to mention is that when I started here, I asked Mike Nugent, an independent workman's comp and insurance advisor to many cities in the Chicagoland area, to come in. He has been working with our legal department, our human resource department. One of the significant changes he recommended in the negotiation of these service agreements is, I think, significant, because the resulting savings in this second contract will be $50,000 a year, or $150,000 over that 3-year term. One thing he pointed out at here, as well as in Bloomington, it's very typical for insurance companies or group to try to structure a commission-based fee in the area workman's compensation. I don't subscribe to that. We eliminated it, and many cities have done that. So this will be the first time we're shifting from a commission-based to a fee-based for workman's compensation services. It eliminates the incentive for them sometimes to seek their income based on sometimes the amount to be paid out. So it's a very positive thing. It's a good, positive change that over these next 3 years will result in a $150,000 change. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The last 2 memos, the Public Service Committee tomorrow will consider a contract to purchase a Ford Transit cargo van for $26,882. And the Public Safety Committee tomorrow will consider a budget amendment and purchase of a Typhoon fire engine for the amount of $586,429. Is there any questions on those 2? Moving on, I'm just going to make quick reference under amendments, change orders, and payments. Council Memo 308-18, 309-18, 311-18, and 312-18 will be considered by the Public Service Committee tomorrow. And Council Member 310-18 requests authorize approving claims reconciliation true up in the amount of $55,278 was reviewed by the Finance Committee May 15th and with a positive recommendation. Is there any questions on any of those amendments, change orders, or payments? If not, City Clerk, that completes the review of everything on tomorrow night's agenda up to that point.
Next is public comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak under public comments this evening? Seeing none, we'd have a request for closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, land acquisition, or conveyance pending or threatened litigation, after which the meeting will be adjourned?
So moved. Second.
Been motion seconded to approve. Councilman Dickinson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gavin?
Aye.
Councilman Girl?
Aye.
Councilman Hug?
Aye.
Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Mudrin?
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman?
Aye.
Councilman Turk?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Here.